They say that weather changes moods. And with the Florida Panthers and the news that we heard on the status of Aleksander Barkov, the weather seems just fine.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Panther fans, to this Wednesday evening edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at @LO_FLA Panthers, and shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. So, Panther fans, it is, by the time you're listening to this, a lot of you, it will be Thursday. We are releasing this late on a Wednesday night for you guys, prior to the Panthers taking on the Edmonton Oilers in Game 3 of the Stanley Cup final. And it was a little bit of a struggle for the Florida Panthers to get off the ground to begin with, as their flight was delayed 3 hours due to the weather in South Florida. But they are expected to arrive in Edmonton around 8 p.m. Mountain Time, right before Game 3. So they'll still get plenty of time and rest. And also the Panthers benefited in this way. The guys on the plane got to extend their poker game by just a few hours. So good for them. But it is a Wednesday evening edition of the show, which means it is a Winans Wednesday edition too. And Jacob, welcome back to the show. And I want to start off the show with apologizing to you because twice during this playoff run, I've pushed your start time around. So I'm sorry for pushing you around as far as your recording time, my friends. But welcome back either way.
Yeah, no worries. It's kind of like Paul Maurice shuffling the lines. I got to be flexible, so I'm good with that. And anytime John Buccigross is on, happy to move around to make time for Bucci. He's a legend. He's awesome. Really cool that he was able to join again. So no worries at all on the start time.
Awesome. But to the main topic at hand for the Florida Panthers, all the worry that we had even after Game 2 of the Stanley Cup final, and just for me, this is why I just wanted to be a little bit, let things play out for everything with Aleksander Barkov and the injury too, before just making a snap judgment. It doesn't excuse the hit that Leon Dryasaitl laid on Barkov back in Game 2 with leaving his feet. But Paul Maurice sounded optimistic on Tuesday. Practice on Wednesday, went on that top line. And for Tarasenko, he was the only one missing from practice. Paul Maurice also said that for him, it's a minor thing. But let's hear from the horse's mouth of Paul Maurice of what he had to say about Barkov taking the ice at practice, and then we will get your thoughts.
Yeah, I got through skate. It felt better today, and got through the skate today. As far as I know, I haven't checked after, and then we'll get him on a plane, get him off a plane, get him on the ice, and make a decision where he's at tomorrow. But he looked good today.
Yeah. So Jacob, everything was from the press conference of just it feeling like a funeral, even when they won the game, to now the change in tone, and now to getting back on the ice to this. I mean, for Barkov, just whatever you think about also this stage, about being in a championship round too, and you knowing how many guys just put their bodies out there too. It's also great to see for the Florida Panthers, us, the fans, and even the team, how great it is to see him back. But also, not only do I want to ask you your feeling on just him being back, but also just your opinions on what led to all of this too. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah. First and foremost, Barkov's health was the biggest concern, without a doubt. And based on his practice availability, he's in a full contact, so that's a really good sign. And also worth noting, he practiced without wearing a face shield. No, he wasn't in the fishbowl of the bubble, and he was full contact. So that indicates that it wasn't really a facial injury. So you pair that, it's fair to assume it was concussion protocol. Could still be concussion protocol. We haven't gotten word he's been cleared to play necessarily. He practiced, but not necessarily cleared to play. So anytime you have a player in concussion protocol, you can't really predict the timeline. So that would definitely lend itself to the concern and the sort of somber tone we heard after a Game 2 win. You don't, to everyone's knowledge, that's your captain and best player that's going through the concussion exam process and wasn't able to finish the game. So you don't know, you really don't know what's going to come of that. So seeing him on the ice today is huge. All signs point to him not missing any time. You hope there's not any kind of residual effects. As South Florida fans, we know we've seen the dangers of a player coming back from a head injury too fast and suffering another one. The Tua Tagovailoa situation that's always in the forefront of South Florida sports fans' minds. So
Patrick Hornquist too.
Patrick Hornquist as well. It's something you have to take really seriously. So we'll see we'll see if he gets cleared for tomorrow. We'll see how he looks on the ice, but everything looks pretty good as far as his health is concerned. And I'll kind of use that to transition to my second point of that, because that should not in any way excuse the hit from Leon Dryasaitl. Just because Barkov is okay or seems to be okay does not in any way make that a cleaner hit. It doesn't make that any more of a hockey play. It was dirty. There's no other way to put that. He leaves his feet. He charges into Barkov. No attempt to play the puck. Sees a guy with his head down, vulnerable, and launches upwards with the elbow right into the jaw. It could have been much, much worse.
Much worse, for sure.
And I'm not calling Dryasaitl a dirty player. I think he was a frustrated player in the moment, and I think it's a dirty hit, but to me, it's more reckless than dirty. I don't think he's trying to injure Barkov. I think he was just frustrated, and I think he made a really, really reckless play, and I think the league dropped the ball as far as punishment goes, because I think if that's a third liner or a fourth liner, a bottom six player, they're in the press box. The only reason he's playing Game 3 is because that's Leon Dryasaitl, and he's a star player. You don't want star players watching games for suspensions. So he gets away with one. Panthers have gotten away with a couple here and there. It goes both ways at times. We're fortunate Barkov's okay, and Edmonton is fortunate that Dryasaitl is playing. Yeah,
and for Leon there, if he were to get fined, that would kind of mean the NHL admitting some type of fault there. So it's a for them not doing it, it's a save your butt type of deal for them. So it's not for me, it's more of understanding on that part, but not excusing it for that. But also and reckless, you use that word, and it also takes me back to a reckless play that happened last year. Nico Hischier with Barkov taking that face off that he uses his shaft to get him right in the leg too, and that was a painful one, and I just remember the discourse there for that play too. I mean, we don't want to define a player over one moment too, but we do got, but it's still something that gets remembered too. So that's even a year and a half after he's your face off. It's still in my mind too. So that's and the fact that it's the Stanley Cup final, it's only amplified. Hey, if the Panthers win, they'll that still be somewhat in our memory too. But also hopefully and thankfully for Barkov, he'll be able to play, because also for head injuries and getting on a plane and the altitude there, you also got to see how he is once he gets off too.
Especially with the duration of that flight, it's the longest distance between Stanley Cup opponents in the history of the league. So that's a very long flight and some not great weather, as we know. There are some factors there, so it's not completely out of the woods. But before I kind of put a bow on it, I do want to get your opinion on something here. Do you think it's obviously not supposed to factor into it at all? But the more I thought about it, do you think player safety or the league in general gave any sort of weight to the fact that the Panthers scored on that power play with Dryasaitl off the ice and essentially put the game away? I personally don't, but I could see an argument that Draisaitl's punishment was the fact that his penalty gave up the back-breaking goal, and they, who knows how well they could have come back from a 1-goal deficit. He takes that penalty. It's now a 2-goal deficit. The game's essentially out of reach. He kind of gets punished with the game 2 loss if you think about it that way.
I don't think it's necessarily that play or that goal specifically. It's funny because I was thinking more of if the Edmonton Oilers found a way to win game 1 and the series was tied, maybe you would see it differently. But based on I think I see it based on the deficit more than the actual goal. If I'm being honest, so that's another thing for that. So I that's my other way of saying that I don't really know too. So I can admittedly say that. So we don't know what's in the mind of George Peros when he's making all these decisions. But once again, we'll see what Barkov's status is going to be after that flight, which the last time there's a flight that long between 2 Stanley Cup opponents was in 2011, Boston, Vancouver, which, by the way, before we transition, if you have a chance to watch a 30 for 30, I'm just here for the riots, please go watch it. Great documentary, by the way. So must watch, which is on your ESPN Plus subscription if you happen to have one. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss Conn Smythe favorites. Yes, we're going to actually have that conversation on the show. We are going to discuss who we think is the leader and who and how close is it for them. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time makes getting NBA and Stanley Cup final tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With the killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, view from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA and NHL tickets. Priority last-minute deals, and you can save up to 60% off buying tickets for sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. You have zone deals. You can save even more when you choose the section and let Game Time choose the seats. And it's all in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprises and fees at checkout and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find something better. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off your purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to this Wednesday evening edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that screaming? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Back here with Jacob Winans here to discuss something. It's funny because, Jacob, this is a conversation that after I recorded game 2 post-game with Jackson Holzer, him and I were talking off the record and just saying, and I was saying, I'm not going to talk Conn Smythe because the Panthers haven't clinched anything yet. And then the conversation even around national media keeps talking about it. And sometimes I have to remove me being from South Florida, the Panther fan, but also discuss this even prior to anything, because I mean we've even seen Conn Smythe winners on losing teams. I mean going back to 2003 with the Anaheim Ducks for them. But I mean I just think about this more and more, and this is just something I've just been thinking about more and more each day, and just about how the Panthers 14 of their 19 playoff games, 2 goals or less. In the last 2 rounds, with the whole conference final and then 2 games through, only 1 power play goal, and these last 2 rounds you have faced the best of the best. So I know Sergei Bobrovsky hasn't always been challenged throughout this postseason, but I think of weight of games, and I think of them like the best comparable I can put it is the PGA Tour, the FedEx Cup playoffs. as you get round by round, the points are magnified. And a birdie is more crucial in the case of the Panthers. 2 shutouts and 2 straight game ones. So after game 1, I was saying Bobrovsky is right there behind Barkov, but then even with 1 goal against after that softie, I think it's so neck and neck, and I think that unless the Panthers have a win where it's like 4-3 and Barkov has more than a point average the rest of the way, I don't know how it's not Bobrovsky. So what are you thinking of here, or are you going in a different direction?
Yeah, for me, and we've talked about this. It's tough for me to even have this conversation just because I'm such a superstitious guy when it comes to this sort of thing. It's you don't want to celebrate too early, but
you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch.
Exactly. So where I'm at with it, this is strictly I won't say a prediction. I'll say a leaderboard.
Yes.
And my leaderboard right now, it's got Bobrovsky at the top. It's the numbers are ridiculous. Last year it was like individual efforts on a game by game basis, but this year he's gotten the help of a very, very solid defense. And through the first 2 rounds, you didn't see the crazy good numbers for Bob. There were, and it was mainly because there were so few shots against him that if he gives up 1 or 2, his save percentage is in the 8s. And I think I felt like that was a really unfair. Just looking at the numbers, it was an unfair picture painted on Bob in the first 2 rounds. But through those rounds, you could really see that he was on top of his game, and the timely saves were there. You think of game 2 against Tampa, the Bobbery. That's a timely save. They end up winning that game by 1. If that goal goes in, who knows where the Panthers are right now. I still think they win that series, but if you end up with a 1-1 series headed back to Tampa, it could be a much longer series. It could be a different story. He makes the timely saves against Boston when Swayman was playing out of his mind. He outduels Shesterkin again in the Rangers series, and everyone comes into that series thinking Shesterkin is, and rightfully so, the best goalie in the league. But to come out on the better end of that goalie matchup, and now right now to start the Edmonton series with 1 goal against in 2 games against the best player on the planet, that it's pretty insane what Bob is doing right now. He's dialed in. The defense is dialed in front of him. When he kicks out a rebound, the defense is right there to clear the slot. It's such a rhythm right now that he's in tandem with the defense. It's hard to pick anyone over Bob right now. He's locked in unless he has a really bad game, and unless he puts up a stinker, like you said, and Barkov has to kind of carry offensively. I think it's Bob, but Barkov has played the best hockey of his entire life these playoffs, especially defensively. What he's done against Dryasaitl, McDavid, Panarin, Benajad, Kreider, Pasternak, Kucherov. Him and Forsling on the ice together. It's a lost cause even trying to score a goal against that matchup right there. And I think Barkov is really taking his game to a next level. He's found the playoff dominance, and that was really the last thing missing in his skill set.
Just refreshing Bob's numbers. Even though it's less shots, his save percentage has already surpassed his total from the Stanley. And I know that can change from now until after game 3, but 1 percentage point better now currently. And he gave up 9 in the final game in game 5 of the series against the Vegas Golden Knights too. So so maybe that number might have skewed it back to 915 for Bob. Back at the end of last year too, but also the fact that once again the Panthers just get better as the games go, and it's proof based on just the goal differential by period. I mean, Panthers -3 in the first, second +8, third +17. Those includes empty netters too, for what that's worth. But the Edmonton Oilers +10 in the first, +10 in the second, -11 in the third.
Yeah,
So,
and not only do the Panthers get better as a game goes on, but they tend to get better as a series goes on. And that's my key with Bob, is that every champion team needs their goalie to at least steal one game a series. That's really, on average, you got to steal at least one a series. And Bob has now gone 2 series in a row stealing game 1 where the Panthers did not play their best hockey. And you need your goalie to steal you that game, especially against Edmonton at home. And Bob has stolen 2 game 1s with shutouts. It's not just the numbers, it's also like in college football, you talk about like one game on every Heisman winner's resume. They call it the Heisman moment. For a goalie, you need that goalie moment, the Conn Smythe moment where you steal a game, and Bob's given it to us twice. So it's arguably 3 times if you count game 2 against Tampa, but that seems like so long ago. But he's stolen a couple games, and that's what you need from your starter.
Yeah, I just thought of 2 quick Heisman moments. The moment you said that, Johnny Manziel in Bama, Jameis Winston in Clemson. Those were road wins too for both of them. So Bob did one on the road in the Rangers series, and then doing one at home. So doing it in different venues, the venue does not matter for him too. So that's a great thing for Sergei Bobrovsky there. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where now the Panthers and the series shifts to Edmonton. We're going to discuss more about game 3 keys and also more miscellaneous stats ahead next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. And Locked On Florida Panther fans, I want to take this moment to bring up one of our partners, the ultimate mobile game, Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think you can run a team better than Bill Zito? I highly doubt it, but you can give it a try and your dream can come true. And this game is definitely for you. And you can manage strategic aspects of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, and navigate through free agency and a draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Panther fans, you know there's no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve the team's chances, and why I think you're going to love the game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go and as you want and when you want to. Locked On Network listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On NHL in the game store. So make sure you check it out. Download the game. Just visit hockeygm.app or look it up in the App Store. Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty today. Segment number 3 here on this Wednesday night, June 12th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. So game 3 tonight from Edmonton, as the Florida Panthers are hoping to take a 3-0 series lead. They're 6-2 on the road, for what that is worth. And Jacob, I want to talk more about just the overall, just how the Panthers are consistently finding ways to win in this series. And when we think about teams getting better, but also just, we talk about depth, and I also think about distribution of ice time and faceoffs, 2 key factors that have been in the Panthers' favor really in this series. And if you guys are on the YouTube, I'm going to provide a little bit of a screen share. Look at the difference between just time on ice for the guys like an Evan Bouchard and a Connor McDavid. An average and for a defenseman like Bouchard, 5 minutes more of ice time than Gustav Forsling for the Panthers. And there were, and obviously in game 2, those were a little skewed with the injury and the 5-minute major misconduct to Warren Foegele, but also Evan Bouchard taking up the Darnell Nurse minutes, which it was logged at the 26th minute when he had that turnover to Evan Rodriguez too. But also, if we categorize this a little differently too, if you see this refreshed here, faceoff percentage. I mentioned Kevin Stenlund yesterday, but also the other guys who are getting it done too. Sam Bennett Evan Rodriguez, who had to take a lot of draws when on that third line when Sam Bennett was hurt with that hand injury back in round 1, but also knowing Paul Maurice when he picks his spots and on different parts of the circle too. We've seen it also with Sam Reinhart picking getting on a draw on his strong side. He's right at 50%. Barkov at 53 too. So the time on ice distribution and really the face-off percentage for the Panthers. I mean, I know once again, not the be all end all, but timely for the Panthers on just what they're doing to possess the puck and even establish their forecheck for them. Not as much in game 1, but thankfully their ability to at least get quick outs into the zone really helped them get more set for game 1 when the Oilers were coming off the ice. So when you see the time on ice distribution of how skewed it is towards the Oilers for the top and even at the bottom, I didn't scroll down at the bottom, but you see a lot of Oilers at the bottom too. So the Panthers are mostly in the middle, which is a place that you want to be. So looking at that, how do you feel when you see that?
Yeah, so looking at that, I see Gus Forsling at 23 minutes a game. I see Aaron Ekblad just under 23 minutes a game. I see Brendan Montour just over 20, and I see Nico Mikkola just under 20. That's your top 4 playing pretty much a perfectly even 40 minutes. That's exactly what you want from your top 4 as far as their ice time goes. Edmonton doesn't have that luxury. Evan Bouchard's up playing roughly half the game, right at 29 minutes a game. Connor McDavid is playing 6 minutes a game more than Barkov is. That is going to wear on you. The longer this series goes, and we're all hoping this is a quick series and this is over in the next few days. I don't think that's necessarily realistic.
I agree.
But the longer this series goes, those are hard minutes in the playoffs. 30 minutes a night in the playoffs. That's probably closer to 35, 40 minutes a night in a regular season game. It's not sustainable for that long, especially the way the Panthers play. The forecheck is nasty. As a defenseman, when you go back to retrieve that puck, you're taking a hit from somebody. Connor McDavid is having to work really, really, really hard to get his ice, and it's not like he's not finding it. He is. It's just the Panthers are making him work hard for it, and that kind of stuff adds up. That's a lot of mileage, and it's not this time of year. Those are not easy minutes to play. It's physical. There's a lot of hacking and whacking and the sticks are connecting and you're having to make a lot of quick decisions and those decisions you got to make them fast, but when you start to think about it, when you start to think about that hit that's coming or you're tired and your legs aren't there, the next thing to go is the decision making, and that's going to catch up to him. McDavid in particular, he's a machine. He never seems to get tired, but and he's never been in this situation before, and it's going to catch up to him. It's impossible not to. They're human at the end of the day.
Yes, yeah, and their bodies can only take so much when they're logging that much time, and then whenever Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Zach Hyman aren't getting to the net, I mean. I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, Jacob, but I remember when LeBron James was first coming into the league, into the NBA, he had a godlike performance against the Detroit Pistons, like 25 of their last 27 points during that. And I feel like that this is Connor McDavid would have to have the hockey equivalent of that especially when Draisaitl's not getting the support from Holloway and McLeod. Adam Henrique and both Matthias Janmark in game 1 had breakaways and they couldn't convert. So, I mean, again, it's the missed opportunities for them whenever you like that aren't converted. And it's just like, man, if they're not converting on this one, it's like you're wondering if you're on the Edmonton side of things, how they're going to get them. But also for the Panthers, a key to the game is like continue to force the Oilers to get the puck back to the blue line, because the Panthers have been shot blocking so well. I mean, their defensemen have more shots on goals in game 2 than the forwards. I incredible. It just goes to show just about how there's no passing lanes in the middle, and then you have to try to force something to try to get some type of balance. But it's just going away from the net too. And it's just, you're not making Bob work as much. I know we just finished mentioning Conn Smythe, but still you're not peppering as much as you want to. So for the Panthers, I mean, if that puck is at the blue line, they're not scared at all.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. But as the series shifts to Edmonton, one thing that's going to be really important as a key to Game 3, it's going to be the faceoffs. And the reason is last change. Yes. Edmonton is going to. We discussed this this time last week. We discussed can the Panthers force Edmonton to have to super load that top line, McDavid, Dryasaitl, Hyman. And you said that you didn't think they would go they would resort to doing that until at least Game 3. They've had to do that in both Game 1 and Game 2 for long stretches because the offense isn't there from the depth.
Yeah.
I expect to see a heavier dose of that in Game 3. You get last change as the home team. I expect they'll try to get those three top scorers out against the Panthers' bottom 6 as much as possible. You have to hold your own in the faceoff circle. Because if Edmonton wins that draw, you're already at a disadvantage. You got to win faceoffs and get quick outs when those guys are on the ice. And that's one thing as a bottom 6 center. You may be outclassed with McDavid or Dryasaitl skill-wise, but something like faceoffs, Kevin Stenlund's sitting at 70% right now. He has every bit of a chance to win that faceoff as one of the best players in the world. And winning those faceoffs is going to be so key, especially for the bottom 6. The way it's gone right now, it's the top 6s have canceled out. Essentially, it's been a net zero for both. The Panthers' depth is shining through, and you have to continue that. And it's going to come down to possession, and faceoffs are the driver to possession. And then my other key would just be discipline. Things got really heated in Game 2. Edmonton completely lost their composure, and we know what that looks like. The Panthers were guilty of it against Vegas, and it submarined their series. Keep your discipline. We know Dryasaitl took the cheap shot. It was reckless, dangerous, injured your captain, even if it was temporary. The best revenge, the best retribution is winning the series. Don't stoop to the level of the Sam Carrick slash between the legs, the Desharnais high shot to Steven Lorentz's face, the knee on knee hits. Just keep it clean. Keep
the Evander Kane punch to Tkachuk.
The Evander Kane punch. If one team is going to be undisciplined and lose their cool, make it Edmonton. Don't even engage in any of that. That's going to be the biggest key for me is discipline, stay out of the box, and win faceoffs.
Yeah, and speaking of Evander Kane, he didn't practice today neither. And I don't know if you've noticed on the bench, but he's had a hard time sitting down too because of the sports hernia that he's dealing with. So even before he shifts, he's standing up a little bit to get his body loose too before getting on the ice. And I'm like thinking, ooh, that can't be comfortable to play with.
Only 12 minutes a game for him right now, and he doesn't have a shot on goal in the series. He's a really good player. You want to see both teams healthy, but Panthers had their fair share of this last year. You get this far, guys. More often than not, somebody's not even a shell of themselves at this point. Yeah. And right now, it's Evander Kane.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Corey Perry draws to the lineup. We'll see if Cody Ceci does with the status of Darnell Nurse too. So I mean, it feels like the injury script has flipped the other way for the Panthers in this time around. But hey, there's still a game left to be played in the Stanley Cup final, and it's good. We'll see how the Panthers do it. We'll see if they can get their forecheck going so that they can match against McDavid without getting that line change. So that's definitely another thing that I'm going to be looking for on Thursday night. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday night edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, preparing for Game 3 of the Stanley Cup final from Rogers Place. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8, and I'll see probably a bunch of you guys at the watch party this weekend for Game 4. I will definitely be there for that. So let's hope we have something to celebrate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, my friend. And I will see you next week.
Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.